Hi guys, welcome to an interesting video on Wild Rift. So today we're back with episode 3 of Wild Rift Fundamentals, and today we're going to be talking about offensive items, or AD items, you could also call it. So, of course, my first episode of Wild Rift Fundamentals was actually on defensive items, and I wasn't actually planning to make a item guide for the attack as well as the magic. We'll probably do another one on magic and boots after these for our next 2 episodes or somewhere down the line in the future. But I got a bit inspired by my friend who didn't really understand the items and he was really trying to get into the game. So I thought, why not just make some videos to help all the beginners understand all the items. So it's also better that I split it into like 3 to 4 videos because it's a lot more digestible. It's not just one huge like 1.5 hour, 2 hour video. If I combine all of them, I expect it to be around that kind of length because I talked pretty in depth about each item. So as you guys can see, we're here jumping right into the physical section. There's a lot of items to cover, and it's just nice that I didn't cover this previously because after the 2.4 update, there's a lot of new items that mostly are physical. So this is recorded in 2.4a, just so you guys know. Like in my defensive items video, I recorded it before the frozen mallet was removed, and it's still in that video, of course, but it has since been removed from the game. So let's just get into all the items. So first up is Bloodthirster. It gives both AD and crit, and unlike the defensive video, this time I am going to talk about the stats because the stats are pretty important here. So it does give a pretty good amount of AD as well as 25% crit. Now, if I'm not mistaken, all crit items give 25% crit, so I'm just going to call it a crit item in general. But the main usage for this is the 15% physical vamp. So other than other items like the Death's Dance and the Blade of the Rune King, this is your only other option for physical vamp. So pretty much physical vamp is between Blade of the Rune King as well as the Bloodthirster if you're not building Death's Dance. So this item is the first item for Draven just because he wants AD and crit and he loves the lifesteal. If not for other champions, it's normally their last crit item, or if they have like 75% crit, this would be their 4th crit item or their 3rd crit item for those who want to hit 75% crit with this item. But honestly, this is not a very popular item. Normally it's built solely by Draven, and other ADCs can opt into it if they need more lifesteal, but it's not a very common item. Now, we have Static Shift, another crit item. So crit items in general, their stock has actually fallen except for the Essence Weaver, Solari Chargeblade, and Infinity Edge, just because that is the main 3 item crit combo for people who go for crit. The rest of the crit items stock has fallen quite dramatically. So Static Shift used to be an item that a lot of people built, but not anymore. It is a crit and attack speed item, so it gives 35% attack speed in addition to the crit. No AD here, that's something to take note. Slight movement speed buff, but when you move, you actually gain energized stacks, and when you hit 100, you gain this extra ability, which will be a trend for some other items, other energized items as well, like the Rapid Fire Cannon or the Storm Razor. We'll get to that later on. So for this, when you get your energized stacks to 100, your next attack will be sort of like an AoE. You'll spread some lightning that can bounce up to 5 nearby enemies, including minions and monsters. And something to take note of with this item is that if you hit a tower with an enemy nearby, it can proc onto the tower and bounce to nearby enemies or minions, so you will take tower aggro because of that. This is something very important to take note when you have this item, because sometimes you just randomly attack the tower, you take tower aggro, and you die because of it, like when you get CC under the tower. So this is something you have to take note of. Yeah, but pretty much this is a pretty good item because a lot of ADCs want more AoE, at least previously, and this does give it to them. Now, Blade of the Rune King used to be a staple, and at one point was the most meta AD item out of all of them. So it does give 20 attack damage, pretty low amount of attack damage, and 35% attack speed. But it does have a lot of passives. So first up, we have 10% physical vamp. As mentioned, this is the main physical vamp option that you would normally go for if you need physical vamp in your build. Then we have the Ruined Strikes, which essentially is a tank shredding ability. You will do 6% of your enemy's current HP on hit, so it does shred tanks relatively easily. And lastly, you have the Drain passive, which of course does have a minute cooldown, where if you attack the same champion 3 times, you will steal, I believe it's their movement speed. Actually, let's just take a quick look at it. It steals their movement speed for 2 seconds. Yeah, so basically it's just a speed up. So this item has quite a lot in it. It's probably one of the most overloaded items out of all of them. But it does give only a little bit of everything. So it gives a little bit of AD, the normal amount of attack speed, a little bit of physical vamp, which is less than the Bloodthirster, of course. And it does give a little bit of good damage with the tank shredding ability, and a little bit of movement speed as well. So all round, it's a good item. You honestly really can't go too wrong with building this item if you really don't know what to build. But normally there is a more optimal build, like if you're going full crit or whatnot. But if not, this item is pretty much always good. Next we have the Rapid Fire Cannon. It's another crit and attack speed item, same stats as the Static Shiv, and also has the same movement speed as the Static Shiv. The only difference is it has a different energized passive. So between Static Shiv and Rapid Fire Cannon, they're basically identical except for their passive. So with Static Shiv, with Rapid Fire Cannon, the passive is when you hit your max energized stacks, you will actually get a slightly increased attack range, which is 150 to be exact. You get 150 bonus attack range for ranged champions and 50 for melee champions, but no melee champion will ever build this item, as far as I know. So, it also has a passive which causes energized stacks to stack faster, 25% faster. So that's also good for the rest of your energized items. So this is the more popular crit attack speed item compared to the Static Shiv. So a lot of people like to use this. Even now, people still use this, like Jinx or Jin. They will still build this item. Of course, this is just a standard crit item. Now we have Runan's Hurricane, which thankfully I can click on because I'm on Galio, who is a melee champion. So Runan's Hurricane, it's an item that is still very popular because there isn't really any other item that can do what it does. So it does also give the same 25% crit, but it gives even more attack speed with 45% attack speed. No AD as usual for the crit items. And it does have the passive Wind's Fury. So it makes all your basic attacks AoE, which will strike 2 nearby enemies. Of course, it only deals 40% of your physical damage, but they can crit and they can trigger on-hit effects, which is pretty important of a detail. So a lot of champions still build this, like Jinx and Kai'Sa. A lot of people still build Runan's Hurricane. Runan's Hurricane is a pretty good item for pretty much majority, I wouldn't say majority of crit builds, but for champions who need AoE that build crit is what I would say. Next we have Youmuu's Ghostblade, our first lethality item. 50 AD, 10 ability haste, and 10 armor penetration, which is 10 lethality, which also basically means you remove 10 armor from your opponent, is what it means. It's flat armor penetration. So if your enemy has 40 armor, you have this item, they now have 30 armor when you attack them, in case you guys didn't understand what that was. So now, moving builds momentum. Now momentum is different from energized stacks, but it also is gained by moving around. So when you reach 100 stacks, you have an increased movement speed, and when you attack with max momentum, you do get 25% increased attack speed for the next 4 seconds. Of course, no longer has the on-hit magic damage, but this is a very common first item for people who build lethality just because of the movement speed. And the other lethality item, which is also actually very commonly a first item for people who build lethality, is the Duskblade. Now the difference between the Duskblade and the Youmuu's Ghostblade, the Duskblade of Drekthar has 5 more AD and 5 more armor penetration, so overall it is more damage. And the passive is when you are unseen for 1 second, your next attack will deal bonus damage as well as giving a 99% slow for only a quarter of a second. So range attacks do not slow, only melee attacks do. So no range champions really built this, only melee assassins normally build this. So of course Youmuu's Ghostblade and the Duskblade are normally built by melee assassins. So now we have the quintessential crit item, which is the Infinity Edge. It gives, I believe that this is the most AD in the game, 55 AD, and of course the normal 25% crit rate. And your crits deal 230% damage instead of 200%. So this this is a pretty essential item just because of the huge injection of AD, as well as making your crits do even more damage. So pretty much in every crit build you will find an Infinity Edge. Of course, now there are exceptions with the addition of the Navori's Quick Blades, which we'll cover later, but pretty much aside from that, every single crit build will include Infinity Edge. And next we have Moral Reminder, which is one of two percentage armor penetration items. So it gives 45 AD, 30% armor penetration. So this is a percentage armor penetration. It's not a flat armor penetration, so it's better against tanks. So if the tank has 100 armor, 30% armor penetration causes them to have 70 armor. Whereas if you had the Yomu's Ghostblade and you have 10 flat armor penetration, it will cause them to have 90 armor. So as you can see, this item is a lot better against tanks. So aside from that, you also have the Grievous Wounds passive. So of course now they rework the Grievous Wounds. So when you deal physical damage, it applies 40% Grievous Wounds. But if they're less than half health, it's 60% Grievous Wounds instead. So of course, for this, there is also the subcomponent of the Executioner's Calling, where it gives 20 AD, but it gives 40% Grievous Wounds for 3 seconds when you attack an enemy, and it's a very common early item for a lot of AD champions. Now we have the Mana Mune, which will evolve into the Mirror Mana. So Mana Mune gives a little bit of AD, a lot of mana, and quite a chunky amount of ability haste. So it is, of course, a tier item, so we have to explain it from the tier. So first, it starts off with a Sapphire Crystal. Every time you cast a spell, it charges the Sapphire Crystal by 5. Then you get to a tier, which does give ability haste and some max mana, where it does also have the passive where 10% of your mana spent is refunded, as well as every time you cast a spell, it gives you 7 more mana, so it stacks by 7 instead of 5, up to 700. Then we have, Then we have the Mana Mune itself, which does give a little amount of AD, mana, and ability haste. But the interesting part here is that your attack damage equal to 1.5% of your mana spent, and grants attack damage equal to 1% of your max mana, and also refunds 15% of all mana spent. So basically, it converts 1.5% of your mana into attack damage, which honestly, if you build this, you're gonna automatically get 1000 mana already when you fully stack it. So that's already a little bit, I believe that's like what, 15 AD. So this technically makes the 25 AD become 40 AD on the attack damage. But of course, you do get the other passives as well, which is you stack by 10 now with every spell cast. So it goes from 5 to 7 to 10. Of course, it caps at 700. And you can evolve it into the Mirror Mana. So now what happens when you evolve it into the Mirror Mana? You get this new passive called Shock. So attacks against current champions consume 3% of your mana to deal double that amount as bonus physical damage. But it only activates if you're above 20% mana. So it's not gonna cause you to, run out of mana in the middle of a fight just because you triggered the passive. So this is pretty huge damage when you evolve the Mirror Mana, of course. So you gotta normally build it on someone who procs abilities very fast. Of course, most commonly Ezreal. It is also an item that Kai'Sa used to build last time, but it takes too long for her to get online, so she doesn't anymore. Some other champions like Senna, I've seen Senna build it, but Senna, honestly, I feel personally that it charges the Mana Mune way too slow. You get evolution very, very late. But yeah, Mana Mune is a pretty niche item, not too many people build it. Next we have Black Cleaver, which is sort of a tanky bruiser fighter kind of item. It gives health, quite a huge chunk of health, some AD, as well as a huge amount of ability haste. 25% ability haste is the maximum amount of ability haste you can get from one item, so that's a lot of ability haste. And this is the interesting part. Dealing physical damage to an enemy champion reduces their armor by 5% for 6 seconds, and you can stack this up to 5 times to give a total of 25% damage reduction. This is a very common first item for bruisers like Renekton and Darius, Riven, these kind of champions who can actually proc the passive really easily. Someone like Renekton and Pantheon, who has a built-in triple attack onto the W, can automatically get 3 procs of the Sunder and immediately get 15% percentage armor reduction. So take note, this is a percentage. So this works a lot like how the Moral Reminder works. It's a percentage, not a flat amount. So this is really good for shredding tanks. But it also has a second passive, which is that when you deal physical damage, you get 20% movement speed, and if you kill someone, you get 60 movement speed for 2 seconds only, and they do not stack. If a ranged champion builds Black Cleaver, they only get half, but no ranged champion builds Black Cleaver as far as I know, because it's just not optimal. So, next item is Triforce, which is the most expensive item in the game, which gives the most, it is sort of, to some people, an upgraded Black Cleaver. So it gives health, AD, but it also gives attack speed in addition to the ability haste. So pretty much you trade a little bit of health and attack damage for attack speed, but it has a lot of passives. So it has the same rage passive as the Black Cleaver. It has the Fervor, which gives a little bit of movement speed, but its main passive is the Spellblade. So using an ability within the next 10 seconds causes the next attack within the next 10 seconds to deal bonus physical damage equal to 200% of your base AD. So that is a pretty chunky amount of damage right there. So every time you cast a spell, your next basic attack is going to do a lot of bonus damage based on your current AD. So this is a very common first item for champions who use a lot of abilities. Champions like Vi, for example, or Nasus, who rely on their abilities to deal damage. Very good item for auto attack enhancers like Vi and Nasus, who will proc it very often. It's not so good on champions who will proc it not very often. Let's just take for example Senna. Now Senna, her cooldown for her Q and her W is over 10 seconds. Her E doesn't actually even do damage, and the cooldown I believe is like 20 seconds or so. So she would proc it like very little compared to someone like, let's say, Nasus, who could have like his first ability on like a 3-second cooldown, for example, who can proc it non-stop. So that's what Triforce does. Now next we have the Mothma. Mortis is more of a defensive item, so it gives 45 AD, which is of course a good amount of AD. Of course, it gives some 45 magic resist as well as 10 ability haste. Now the main reason you build this is for the 45 magic resist. So this is a last item option for a lot of AD carries, and also a like second to third item option for a lot of top lane bruisers or fighters. So basically, magic damage that puts you below 35% health will give you a 350 magic damage shield, and when you trigger this shield, you will get 30 AD, 10% physical vamp, and 10% magical vamp. So it's sort of like a last chance kind of thing. When you get to low health, you get shield, you get more AD, and you get more vamp. So that is what it does. Now next we have the Death's Dance, which is a very common like second last or last item option for a lot of ADCs, and a very common second or third item option for a lot of top lane fighters like Darius, Fiora, Camille. Gives 300 max health, 35 AD, 15% ability haste, as well as 10% physical vamp. So this is your other lifesteal option, but it's a defensive option. The main reason you build it is for the Costerize, where 30% of your damage taken is dealt as a bleed effect over 3 seconds. So basically this delays the damage that you take by 3 seconds, which gives you the chance to lifesteal it back. It doesn't actually reduce the total amount of damage you take, just that it gives you a chance to lifesteal the damage back. Alright, so now on to the Phantom Dancer. It's our next standard crit item, 24% crit, 35% attack speed, and also gives 5% move speed. But the main point of this, which is actually still a very commonly built item, more so than the other energized crit items, is it gives you a shield when you drop below 35% health. So it's sort of like a defensive tool added into your kit. Right, when you drop below 35% health, you gain a 240 to 590 based on your level shield that for 5 seconds. So it sort of just gives you an extra shield when you're at low health, just to help you survive longer, to lifesteal back, to do more DPS. So it's a very commonly built item even now. So that is really good. Of course, next we have the Umbral Glaive, which does give the same stats as the rest of the lethality items: 50 AD, 10 ability haste, and 10 armor penetration. I should say same as Yomu's Ghostblade. But instead its passive is when you are revealed by an enemy ward, you will actually reveal that ward, or it also works on trap. You will reveal the ward or the trap, and you will disable the wards on you for 8 seconds. When you attack once, you instantly destroy a ward or a trap. So you know, like how wards, Teemo's mushrooms, or Jin's traps take 3 attacks to kill, but with this you only take 1 attack to kill, but it does have a 1-minute cooldown. Now honestly, not too many people built this. I assume that this would be better in pro play where there's better vision control, but even in pro play you don't see it too much. In solo queue even less, because if you wanted to build lethality, you might as well just go for the Youmuu's Ghostblade instead of the Umbral Glaive, but Umbral Glaive is of course always an option, especially if you like the vision control, but not too many people built that. So this is the other defensive option for magic defense, where you don't actually get any AD at all, but instead you get attack speed. So this is really good for attack speed carries who need a little bit of magic defense, like to avoid getting one shot. Somebody like Master Yi, or even AD carries like Kai'Sa, who wants attack speed and magic resist for that particular game, can opt into the Wit's End. And aside from just the pure stats, it actually has a pretty sweet passive where when you are below 50% health, your attacks will deal bonus magic damage, and that bonus magic damage will actually give you a heal. Of course, on ranged champions, you only get 33%, so a third damage, a third of the heal, whereas melee champions actually get the full heal. So this is a really good item on someone like Master Yi, especially. Of course, you don't opt into it every match. This is a very situational item, not a core build kind of item. Now we move on to majority. From here, these are all the new 2.4 items. So next we have the Essence Reaver. It's a very common first item for any caster-based champions, especially AD carries like Xayah and Lucian, where it gives you 40 AD, which is a decent amount, the normal 25% crit, 20 ability haste, and it gives you the Essence Flare, where all your damaging abilities deal bonus physical damage that scales with your crit. Although it's normally built as a first item, but it really ramps up when you get your second and third item when you have more crits. And you also get the Mana Siphon, which restores 2% missing mana on hits, which is of course very useful to just stay topped up, because if you're building this item, you will be an ability caster anyway, so you will obviously need mana, so this is a pretty sweet passive for the Essence Reaver. I recently did get a nerf increasing the gold cost and reducing the ability haste, but it's still a really good item. Next we have the Stormrazor, the last, actually not the last, but one of the newer crit items, where it gives crit, but instead of 35% attack speed, it gives 20% attack speed, but in exchange, you get 25 attack damage, which is, of course, pretty useful. Stormrazor is a common first item for Tristana and Jin, specifically, who want the small bit of attack damage, because if you go straight into crit, you have no AD, so that is an issue. And aside from that, you do get the final energized item, so of course building energized stacks as usual, and when you launch your next attack, it does give on-hit magic damage and also gives a slow for 75% for a second, so this gives a pretty strong slow for 1 second. And if you combine it with something like the Rapid Fire Cannon, you have a long range 1 second slow, whereas if you combine it with something like a Static Shift, you have a AoE 1 second slow. So that is something just to take note, that they do synergize. All the energized items synergize with each other, something to take note. Next we have Sorella's Grudge. I really like this item. 40 AD, 15 ability haste, and same passive as the Maul Reminder, which is the 30% armor penetration, but the Icy passive is really nice, where your damaging active abilities and your empowered attacks will slow enemies by 30% for 1 second. Now 30% is not too much, but for someone who launches a lot of abilities, someone like an Ezreal, someone like a Lucian, the slow can be pretty disgusting, where they're just slowed like permanently and they cannot run away or they cannot dodge your abilities very easily because of the slow. So mainly you build this as, I mean, some people even could build it as a second item. I would say normally go for it like third or fourth when, you know, people actually have armor and you want to strike that armor in addition to get to the Icy passive. And Solari Chargeblade, of course, a very core item for a lot of AD carries, this is a meta-defining item after patch 2.4. It gives the normal 25% crit, 30% attack speed, and 25 huge amount of ability haste. But the important part is the passive. Where using an ability actually gives you radiance, which you can stack up to 3 times. When you have at least one stack of radiance, you get an extra 25% crit rate. So normally this is a second item. It gives you 75% crit rate at 2 items and 100% crit rate at 3 items. So when you crit, you expend 1 charge, obviously, so you can't just stay permanently topped up at an extra 25% crit. That would be way too broken. But there is another part of the passive where you will deal a small amount of true damage on hit, which of course it is a small amount, but true damage is true damage, so it can be mitigated, so you'll take that, and you get increased up to, that damage is increased up to 150% against low health targets. So this is also sort of like an execute kind of mechanics that is really, really strong. And yeah, so each unique ability can only generate a charge once every 2 seconds. Not too many abilities are below a 2-second cooldown anyways, so yeah. Last we have the Navori's Quick Blades, another crit item with 45 AD this time, 25% crit and 15 ability haste. But the unique part about this one is that crit attacks reduce your non-ultimate ability cooldowns by 15% of their remaining cooldown. So it does have a bit of a diminishing returns. So with a longer cooldown left, you will actually get more value from this. And this is the reason why some people don't actually build the Infinity Edge, because if you go Essence Weaver into Solari Chargeblade into Navori's Quick Blades, you will crit every single attack, and you will get your abilities up more often. So if your abilities can do more damage than your basic attacks, which some people can, you would rely more on the Navori's Quick Blades to get your abilities back up more often, and then rely on your ability damage instead of your crits on your basic attack. So this is the other alternative to building the Infinity Edge. So I believe I have covered all the offensive items. So without further ado, let's end off the video. And we will, of course, cover the rest of the magic damage and the boot enchantments and all in future videos. So thanks for watching the video, guys, and goodbye. Well, actually, no. Surprise, there is more. It's not the end of the video because as I just finished recording the video, the patch 2.4b patch notes have released, and in patch 2.4b, Solari Chargeblade actually got a nerf. So the new Solari Chargeblade doesn't actually give 25 ability haste anymore. No more insane ability haste. It just gives 15, and it no longer gives true damage. Instead, it gives magic damage. So this definitely makes Solari Chargeblade a lot weaker, and as of recording this video, we don't know how these changes will affect Solari Chargeblade, but probably not too much because its main use is still just getting the extra 25% crit. So it's basically one item gives you 50% crit. So honestly, I think Solari Chargeblade is still not too bad. So here is the new Solari Chargeblade changes. Thanks for watching the video for real this time, guys, and goodbye.